Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk About EX. I'm your host, Ryan McGrory, and today we have another awesome guest. We've got Dr. Nora Koslowski, co-founder and co-CEO of Even, a cutting-edge digital career development platform for women. Dr. Koslowski is a renowned and recognised expert in online education and workforce development and brings a wealth of knowledge to today's discussion on advancing women in leadership roles. Now join us as we explore the creation of Even and the founder journey, and also the significant impact that it aims to have on women's career trajectories across the globe. Nora, it's great to have you on the show. I've been following you for a while. Actually, that sounded pretty weird. I've been following your work for a while on LinkedIn, and I'm delighted that we're chatting here today. So first off, just thanks for coming on.
I'm delighted to be here, and I've also been following you for a while, weird as that sounds.
Excellent. The mutual following, that's good. I like it. So you've recently, in the last year, become a founder of a really exciting company. I wonder if we can start by telling us a little bit about Even and the inspiration behind starting a digital career development platform specifically for women.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so in the last 6 months with my co-founder Ellen Sullivan, we have created Even, and Even is a career development platform for women. And the way that it started was, like with many of life's best things, it was over a cocktail. And so Ellen and I worked together for 4 years. We were both at Melbourne Business School. I was the Chief Learning Innovation Officer there. Ellen ran an innovation hub, so we both are disruptors in our very core. And we were responsible for creating some really flexible, inclusive, and more progressive learning solutions for Melbourne Business School. But we connected over the challenge that we both faced as working women and working mothers. And so the inspiration was really, so for Ellen, it was having had to combine an ambitious career with chronic health conditions. For me, it was more, I'd had some experiences as a woman of facing pregnancy discrimination, facing sexual harassment, facing issues of things that when I started my career in my 20s, thought were things of the past. And I couldn't quite believe that it was late 2023 when we were talking about this, and it was still happening. So I'd had things happen like, job offers being retracted or changed when a potential employer found out I was pregnant. So the exciting leadership role became more of a project-based role because they thought it was better for me. And so we just couldn't believe that women still were having to go through that. And I am a mother to two daughters, and just thought, you know what, we can do so much better. So let's actually solve for some of the big challenges that women are facing. So, and what I mean by that is women are represented to a lower degree than men at the levels at which decisions are made in organizations. So in Australia, 9 out of 10 CEOs of ASX 300 companies are men. We know that globally, the levels at which women are hired into leadership have declined for the first time since 2023, not increased. And some recent data out of the US, which surveyed something like 480,000 women, showed that for every 100 men hired into leadership, only 82 women are hired or are promoted into leadership for the first time. So there's a lot of barriers that women face. And even when you look at overall representation in the workforce, a lot of women drop out of their careers for varying reasons, whether it's child caring, whether it's health, whether it's caring for elderly, or issues like menopause. And so the general representation of women in the workforce was also an issue that we weren't satisfied with the levels of progress that were being made. So in Australia, only 62% of women of working age actually participate in paid economic work. And so we said, let's go and solve for some of those issues. And with Even, it's a platform where the customers are employers, and we can talk about exactly what they get from that in a few minutes. But the idea is that we're really trying to tackle these challenges together with employers. It's not women against employers. It's let's actually get together and solve for some of these big, very hard to shift issues.
Wow, awesome. I think you explained the very origins of your founder story, which is very important, which is, having sitting down and having a co-founder cocktail, which is something that should be trademarked, I think. But also the origins of a great story for great businesses often come in the way of solving great problems. I think you can hear the even is setting off to do that. With some of the stats you shared is phenomenal. That in 2024, those are some terrible stats to be hearing about. But and also on one side, they're not so surprising as well. We caught up a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned the hourglass issue in our conversation. You brought it up when we spoke. I wonder if you could explain what this is and how Even is working to address some of these challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And we can stay on the problem for a bit. So one of the issues we discussed a few weeks ago was that when you look at workforces overall, and then you look at the problem of women's representation in the workforce, it can kind of manifest in different ways. So sometimes when you look at the representation of women in a particular organization, you have what is called a pyramid issue. And that's typically the way that the problem manifests. So you see that women are reasonably well represented at entry levels, at frontline levels, but then the higher up you go, the hierarchy, the fewer women there are, and women tend to drop out at a greater rate, or, as I shared at the beginning, not even be promoted or pipelined into these leadership positions. So that's a pyramid problem. But it can also manifest as what some of the organizations that we're engaging with are calling an hourglass issue. And an hourglass issue is when you have representation of women at the entry level and at the most senior levels of an organization, but you have a real gap, and there are not that many women in the middle. So at the middle management layers, and often at the technical leadership layers. And so that we've seen that in some tech organizations, in infrastructure, in sort of high delivery, fast-paced organizations, where the technical roles, they often need to fulfill some serious KPIs quickly, and so they're hired quickly. Whereas at the most senior roles, it's often recruiter-led, and you can take a bit more time to make sure that your workforce there looks relatively even. So it just manifests in different ways, but really the core of the problem is, what are some of these norms that prevent women from being hired into leadership roles, regardless of which level? I think that's still at the core, not so much how it manifests.
And how does Even integrate learning and career development to help ensure that women not only enter high growth fields, but also can climb or have the opportunity to climb into leadership positions and other positions within organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So even as a platform, it supports both women and organizations. And so let me talk about the women first. So women are the end users of our platform. They're really, they're the learners who we support in their career development. And both Ellen and I have that background of, having strong learning and workforce development expertise. And so we really think very carefully about how we design learning that is designed for the needs of women. So we know that women are often time poor. We know that, there's a lot to juggle for many women, especially when you're in a leadership role for the first time, or when you're trying to progress through your career. There's a lot going on often. And so we really wanted to make sure that Even was designed to fit into the demands of a busy schedule. And so what that looks like then is we design learning that is community-based. So let's get technical, as peer-to-peer learning. So women are surrounded by other women. The idea is that they're in small curated groups where they learn from each other over the course of 12 months. And you and I know that, learning is really effective when it's actually peer-driven, and when you're supported, and when somebody cares about you and checks in with you regularly. So that's sort of the first way that we design learning. The second way then is it's problem-based. So in that small group, you're supported by a coach, and the kind of coach and the kind of group that you're matched with depends on a specific problem, a specific challenge, a specific context that you might be in. So let's say you're, a woman returning to work after parental leave, or you might be like me, a migrant woman trying to, create more of a local network. Or it could be that you are trying to figure out how do I stay in the workforce despite chronic health conditions. So specific challenges is what we use to then match you with a coach and a group, and they can help you through that specific problem. And then the other thing I should mention is so that's peer-to-peer, community driven, it's problem based, but then observational learning is really important for us as well. So in Even, we've now, and we're only 6 months in, but we've interviewed about 45 really impressive
Yeah,
women.
wow.
And so they're CEOs, they're women in tech, or they're women who are experts in specific domains like AI, tech, product, data, cyber. They could be women who are experts in women's health, in psychological health and well-being. They could be women who are experts in financial management and how to manage your super, how to manage your investments, how to manage finances within a couple. But it's 45 impressive women, and the idea is that you learn from their stories, you learn from the hard-earned truths that they've gathered over the course of their career, and we have a front row seat, and we can just watch and learn from how they've done it, and they're very real in how they share the stories. And then the last thing is it then also scaffolds into more sort of journey-based learning. And that's very much dependent on how much time the woman has to spend. So if you're very time poor, you engage with bite-sized content. That could be like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. If you've got a bit more time, you have access to master classes that are live, that are 1 hour long. And if you've got more time than that, we still have sprints and career accelerators that are sort of 6 weeks long. So it's really up to the woman determining herself what she can fit into her life, and that's kind of how we think about learning.
Awesome. Excellent. And you've got a lot of experience in learning and learning innovation, and your role as a Chief Learning Innovation Officer. I know you spearheaded large and major digital transformations. So I think you know a thing or two about innovation and also what it takes to make it happen. I'm curious to hear how you see digital first cultures evolving, and maybe share what you think, or what organisations should potentially prioritise to help shape or create these environments effectively.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge topic to go into. How do you innovate? How do you innovate within organizational context? How do you lead digital transformations? But I do now, after having led a digital transformation at Melbourne Business School, which culminated in creating the Melbourne Business School online brand. So I now do get asked a lot about how do you do it? What's the sort of secret sauce for digital transformation? And I mean, you and I both know this. There's no secret sauce. There's no silver bullet for leading a digital transformation or for making an organization more innovative. But I do often, some of the organizations I now work with and advise, I do give them the starting point is to focus on culture, and then I do give them a framework on what are some of the conditions of your culture that will help you or hinder you in how innovative you can be. And it's not about, it's not right or wrong, but it's just kind of helping organizations to assess where they're at, and then they can move based on where they're at. So the kinds of factors that I typically would look at is so how involved, committed, and supportive is your senior leadership all the way to the board? Do they get the need for digital transformation or even an AI transformation? Do they get it? Do they support it? Do they live it? And then you can kind of go, well, yes, that's a great sort of fertile ground. If they don't get it, then you know that you probably need to start doing a lot of, or directing a lot of the work there. I also tend to look at things like culturally, what's your failure tolerance? Again, we both know I mean, you're in employee experience. You can't really innovate unless you actually have a culture where there is some degree of risk taking and actually reward for risk taking. Whereas if it's more of a control culture where there's punishment for failure, then you know that's probably where you need to start some of your work. So I typically look at 5 different factors like that. They also include things like decision making. How centralized is your decision making versus how much autonomy do people have in their individual divisions and individual teams to execute on things and to make changes, because that facilitates the degree of innovation that you can affect as well. But yeah, no silver bullets,
Okay.
and digital transformation is hard. Innovation is hard. It's a multi-year process, and I think you're never quite done with it either, because industries can, they can shift so quickly, and competitors can emerge so quickly as well, that it's always a work in progress.
So you're telling me there's a little more to it than just putting innovation as a company value and putting the word innovation on your website. This is news to me.
Yeah, that's a bugbear when I see that.
I wanted to actually ask your opinion on this because I've noticed working in various kind of corporate contexts over the last few years. This is just my observation, so I don't know if it's the same with yourself. I'm seeing organisations becoming more risk averse, and as a result, being less creative. Is that something that you see, and if so, how do we fix it? How do we move out of that problem?
Oh, well, it's a really hard one, because I think 2024 is also a unique circumstance where you are seeing a lot of organizations focus on efficiency, focusing on productivity. But I actually think it's a misconception to go, when we're focusing on these really core things, it's a misconception to go, we need to wind down our innovation, because your innovation is actually something that can thrive when you're in a constrained environment. So I think when people sort of go, it's either, this growth environment where it's high innovation, or it's a constrained environment where it's high efficiency, cost cutting. I think you actually need to think about that quite differently. And so innovation's perfect when you've got a specific challenge to solve, and, you might have a constrained budget. You sort of go, let's define that problem very, let's define it very clearly, and then let's put some thinking time into that. But it doesn't mean that we have to, expend a lot of money into that specific problem. So yeah, again, no quick fix, but just I think we just need to think about that slightly differently.
I know your mind has been focused on the future for quite some time, whether it's think about the workforce of the future, or developing workforces and educating them for the future. It seems like there's a bit more attention put towards this topic, particularly in the last 18 months to 2 years. What are the key trends that you see, and what do you think businesses should do to focus or to prepare for this?
Yeah, I think this is another one where I see people are asking for, like, what are the 3 to 5 key trends that I should be aware of. And like, we always love if somebody can tell us what the future holds, but it's just, life doesn't really work like that. So I think, rather than saying, focus on AI, focus on personalization, focus on like 3 other things, I actually think it's much more specific than that. I think the way to really plan for how do you develop a workforce for the future, how do you develop learning or skills that are fit for the future in your organization, I think it's more about being very context specific, and then understanding like what is happening in the macro environment, and what are some possible consequences or implications in my industry. So let's say, if X were true, what could that mean for my industry? So, it's just provocations. You're just trying to work through them as they apply to your business. So if it's education, like, let's say, if it were true that no learning would be done in person in the future, what would that mean? And so what would we have to do as an organization, as an educational organization? If it's thinking about, I was earlier this year, I was advising a sort of nutrition and vitamins company, and a big thing was personalization, like personalized prescribed medicine. And if that trend were true and continuing and enduring for our industry, what would that mean with how we go to market? Like, can we then still continue to be just sold in traditional pharmacies, or should we be thinking about, people accessing us in a different way online, in a more personalized way? So that's really how I think about it, is you have got to be really specific to your context. Think about, some possible things that might happen, but then how do they play out specifically to you, rather than everybody just having a like this very base level awareness of a couple of things that are coming, but no idea what they mean for you.
And is this some of the work that you'll be doing or are doing with Even, and how you collaborate with organisations, and if so, how do you work with organisations to implement some of your programs and strategies?
Yeah. So we, with Even, one of the areas that we teach, so we teach three broad areas for the women who are on our platform. We teach life, so that's education, skills, tools in areas like I described earlier. So it's personal finance and investing, it's your health, psychological and physical, and it's the juggle of life. So sort of equality at home, and managing, everything else that life throws at you outside of work. So that's the first area, life. The second area is career. So it's just giving access to tools, information, and knowledge about how do you manage your career. And that does contain information about how do you have a sustainable long-term career. So how do you make sure that you keep up to date yourself? And specifically, then the third area that we teach, which is called Future You. So that's actually where there's a lot more focus on developing awareness of emerging areas as they emerge, and they will always renew. But right now, it's data, it's cybersecurity, it's AI, it's sustainability. And then it's hearing from experts who are practicing in those fields, and hearing about how they're applying that knowledge in their field, so that our women can start to actually be the people who do that within their organizations. So they can be the champions of AI experimentation within their organization, for example, or they can implement some cybersecurity practices within their own lives and their own teams. So we make the women sort of the champions of the future. But then with organizations as well, we give them a lot of, depending on the level of support that the organization wants, we do give them a lot of support to actually make all of that real, and to make it work within their context, because every organization is different. And so we help them to make sure that it integrates into their strategy, whether that's a learning strategy, whether that's a skills strategy, that it integrates into leadership frameworks, or other priorities that they have already around future skilling. But it's quite different depending on what the organization is, and the level of membership that they have with us also varies.
What advice would you give to other organisations, whether it be HR leaders, or those responsible for, or the custodians maybe of culture, to try and develop more inclusive and supportive cultures in their organisations?
Yeah. I mean, you and I talked about this earlier. I think if it's a HR or a culture leader, I think you're probably already quite expert at this. Um, I think the advice I would give here is more about, if you're trying to create an inclusive culture, it's got to be lived, and it's got to be ingrained in behaviors in every person in your organization. If I know anything from like having moved across 4 countries myself, and I'm married to somebody who's lived in 5 countries. We speak 3 different languages at home. We bridge 2 different religious upbringings into our shared practices and traditions at home, if I can call them that. If I've learned anything from that, is that you can never take belonging for granted. And so I think from an organizational lens, for me, it's always like, how can I, as a leader or as a member of an organization, how can I approach others with a degree of curiosity and openness, so that they can feel a sense of belonging and acceptance for who they are, and that they don't have to fit in and be somebody that they're not. Because I think that was my experience a lot in moving countries, is you try to assimilate, you try to fit in, but actually that's not, that isn't the true definition of diversity and inclusion. The true definition is when you can belong as you are. So I think it's more about, what kind of conversations do people consistently have across their organization, where you kind of just go, well, you're from that country. What's that like? What does that mean? What matters to you? What do you care about? Just asking those open questions. And I think sometimes asking the awkward questions that you feel you feel like maybe you shouldn't be asking. So, like right now, like I said, I'm married to somebody who's from a different cultural context. He's Jewish, I'm German. That's awkward in itself. Like asking some questions. Our kids are asking questions about like where have you guys come from, like mom and dad. And now 2024, it's also very awkward having conversations about being Jewish, actually. But leaning into that, I think actually leads to more inclusion, leads to more belonging than just making assumptions about how somebody's feeling, what their views are, or treating them a certain way because of where they're from, what their language is, what they sound like, what their surname is. So I hope that's something that I would love to see more of in organizations, is have the courage to have these awkward conversations.
Awesome. Excellent. I think that's a greater theme even in itself, more courage to have awkward conversations. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And some fantastic messages there and your answer. How do organisations work with you? Like, I'm interested to hear more, and I'm sure those listening would be interested in learning more about Even, or where would they go to catch you or get involved? Where should they go? What type of organisations are you looking to partner with? Tell us.
Thank you, Ryan. So you can find out more about Even on our website. That's even-careers.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's Dr. Nora Koslowski on LinkedIn. And I will give a bit of a plug. So we're doing a webinar in 2 weeks with the Australian HR Institute. So that is a webinar about how to close the women in leadership divide. And I'll be joined by speakers from Canva and from Transurban. So if you'd like to have a look at that, you can find that on the ARI website. But so you were asking about the kinds of organizations we're looking to partner with. We are already partnering with some really progressive and interesting organizations, and we find that currently there are 4 sectors that are probably most ready to invest in their women and who've recognized the problem, which I love. That's kind of how you start to solve it. So those sectors are technology, they are financial services, resources and mining, and infrastructure. But really, it's any organization. So the kinds of symptoms that are often a starting point for a conversation with us at Even are an issue with not enough women in your leadership pipeline or at in your leadership levels, not enough women in technical high growth roles, an issue with regard to gender pay gap, or issues with attraction, retention, and engagement of women. So organizations might be finding that they're losing women at a greater rate than men and are often a bit puzzled as to why that is. So that's often the starting point where we pick up a conversation and where Even can support.
Some of the stats that you shared at the beginning of this call, you've just opened up to all organisations in Australia pretty much there. That's awesome. Thank you very much for your time. It's been excellent having a chat with you. Thanks for dealing with my questions going in every which direction. I was keen to hear your thoughts on lots of different things. And thanks for being so generous with sharing your insights and advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been an absolute delight to chat with you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode with Dr. Nora Koslowski. It was enlightening to hear about the challenges and opportunities in fostering female leadership and how Even is addressing these issues head on. Now, if you found today's conversation as stimulating as I did, then don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube to keep up with more insightful discussions. Now, I encourage you to look at the show notes and find out even more about Even and how you can get in touch with Dr. Nora and the crew at Even. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.